Hey folks, this is Chris Versace here, and typically I'm talking with my cohorts Bob Lang and Lindsey Bell, but this time we're actually chatting with the folks from Healwell AI. That's right, we've got the chairman Ahmed Shahbazi and the CEO Dr. Alexander Dobranowski sitting with us, telling us all about Healwell AI, how the company is leveraging AI, its sizable presence in Canada, to deliver real benefits and disrupt the world of healthcare. It's a great conversation. Sit back, relax, and listen to Bob, Lindsey, and I guide you through a conversation with Healwell AI, and you'll understand why there's a lot of buzz with this. You know, I have to say, I'm really glad, Bob and Lindsey, that we have Ahmed Shahbazi, chairman of Healwell AI, and Dr. Alexander Dobranowski with us, CEO of Healwell AI, to talk all about the intersection of artificial intelligence and healthcare. And, you know, I just think about these two topics. AI obviously getting a lot of headlines, getting a lot of funding, but healthcare, simply a monstrosity and something that, I mean, you talk to almost anybody and they'll tell you, my God, does this need to be fixed? It's a mess. So with that, I'm very happy that Ahmed and Alex, that you're both here to talk to us and walk us through Healwell AI. What do you say we get started?
Sounds great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much.
Oh, excellent. So let me just start with kind of a big question. And I noticed, Alex in particular, that before you were with Healwell, you were at MCI One Health, a large primary care network in Canada, 850,000 plus patients, where you were really working and leveraging technology for primary care services. But you were also, in your past life, a co-founder of DeepScreen AI. And these kind of jumped out at me, and I was wondering, how do you go from that into Healwell? What was it that attracted you to Healwell?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. And let me just start with my background before that too, as I did my medical training and did some of my specialty training in diagnostic imaging. And that's really where I got to witness some of the most exciting technology in healthcare evolve very rapidly, right? Radiology is one of the first specialties to apply machine learning or computer-assisted diagnostics. And that kind of inspired me to then take a leap as an entrepreneur. I started a company called DeepScreen, which was focused in that medical imaging sector. And then my eyes were open. And I think similarly to the problem that Hamid is trying to address with the company that he runs, which is called Well Health, right? And he's the chairman also of Healwell, is that, look, the same application of technology that was applied to medical imaging can be applied to all the data that's captured in primary and specialty care. So I was running a company called MCI One Health, which had a large clinic group, and then also had this budding beginning of artificial intelligence technology that could screen clinical records. And that's really where my paths crossed with my chairman, Hamid, where he was building and running the largest healthcare group in Canada with a big presence in the US. And we ended up going down this path, which, you know, almost a year and a half later led to the launch of Healwell, where I had then divested the clinics into Well Health. And Hamid and I aligned and joined forces, where we then recapitalized the company, launched it 11 months ago. So Healwell is still a pretty new name, but it's through our partnership together where we're really moving forward on this mission to improve preventative care. That's kind of the steps that brought me to where I am today.
Okay. And then, Ahmed, what's vision for Healwell? Because as Alex just kind of laid out, you're wearing multiple hats, and it seems that you've got some strategic vision for where you want to take the intersection of technology and healthcare.
It's a great question. And look, I think maybe just starting with where healthcare is at in terms of the potential for data science and artificial intelligence. You know, healthcare is a data-intensive business. It is probably the most data-intensive business in the world. It generates about 30% of the world's data from a total industry perspective. And the growth of that data is roughly 36% year-over-year growth, which is really just astronomical if you think about it. And this is just because of the complexity of healthcare. You can just think about the complexity of our bodies, the trillions of cells in our bodies, and just all the different vitals and all of this data that we produce, whether it's user-generated data or it's data that's generated by the healthcare ecosystem that tries to support us. All this is starting to find its way into a unified and non-unified data repositories where you have a bunch of structured and unstructured information. And all this has been quite compelling to think about, but the act of actually unlocking this data to advanced health outcomes has really been lacking. For the longest time, we've known this data is out there. In fact, doctors have been quite frustrated about it. They've been inputting data constantly into these EHRs, these electronic health records, and they're not really getting much back. And what we've seen, and we all know we live in a different world since generative AI came out. I mean, AI has been around for a long time. The ability to use machines to mine data and learn from data and identify anomalies, that's been around for a while. It's getting better, and that's already affected our world to a great extent. But this generative AI revolution that we've now been through over the last couple of years has really changed everything. And I think has now accelerated all forms of artificial intelligence in an array of sectors. I mean, there's no sector that's going to evade the effect of artificial intelligence. And so Healwell AI is really our answer to that. As Well Health Technologies, the largest owner-operator of outpatient medical clinics in Canada by a huge margin, we'll do about $1 billion in revenue this year. And a big part of that is clinical revenue. We also have one of the largest digital platforms in the country that support about 37% of all physicians rely on one form or another, some of our digital tools to run their practices. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of involvement in the healthcare ecosystem. We see where all the inefficiencies and challenges are. And the ability to add AI to help physicians with copilots. We've heard a lot about Copilot, Microsoft Excel copilots and PowerPoint and, Canva and Adobe. What about physicians with this incredible amount of data in these patient repositories? And that's what we've done. I mean, effectively, I knew that this is where healthcare is heading. And I knew that I needed to be, as a company that's well steeped in healthcare technology and digital technology to support healthcare, I knew that this had to be an area that we have deep involvement with if I had any chance of being relevant in the healthcare industry in 5 to 10 years. And that's why we started and got involved with Healwell.
So it sounds, if I can kind of, in a nutshell, if you will, there's a lot of data, a lot of signals, and you're trying to make some intelligent use of that for better healthcare. Is that a fair statement?
Okay, you're absolutely right.
So one of the big things I think that people talk about AI with is the ability to streamline process. Is that really what we're talking about here, or is there like another aspect to it, kind of identification?
I think it's both. I think with all this data sitting around in these repositories, first of all, not all of it's very organized. So just the ability to interpret and organize data, artificial intelligence is going to be very, very important, just because so much of the data is dirty. And what I mean by dirty, it's not perfectly arranged in tabular format where you can search it properly. It's doctor's notes, it's machine printouts from various different diagnostic equipment, and all this stuff basically gets sucked into an electronic health record, and all this data sort of sits there. And imagine just how difficult and time-consuming it would be to read everything and integrate the information. So the first thing that all this does is it just makes sense of it or helps organize it. And then what it does is that it takes all this complexity and creates simple, powerful insights, signal, as you noted, then empowers healthcare providers to take preventative care actions, which really impact people's lives.
So, Lindsey, when we were talking before about preventative healthcare, I think you had a question that you wanted to ask these guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many, like you said, the data that you have when it comes to the healthcare system, because it's so big, we're constantly learning more. There's so many different ways you can go in the ecosystem. And obviously, Well Health as an outpatient center has a lot of data. What drove you to focus on preventative care versus another part of the healthcare industry? Is this really the best application for AI right now, or is it the best application for your business as you build it out?
I think it's a great question. I think it is, to some degree, the most important question. I mean, if you are going to deliver better patient outcomes, you have to catch things as early as humanly possible. And in healthcare, time is everything. I'll give you a great example of that. Cancer, right? So we all have in our bodies cancer cells, cells that are not acting in line, that are, essentially not multiplying in the way that they should, but they're typically just addressed by our immune system. And they're sort of dismissed or addressed in a small state. If cancer is not identified early enough, it starts to grow literally into its own living entity, to a point where at some point in time, you need to take actions like radiate it or cut it out or take some very invasive, difficult actions that could harm the rest of the body. Because cancer effectively, as time goes on, fights for its own survival inside your body. And so there's nothing more important than catching these things before they kind of take on a life of their own. And so preventative care is really healthcare. I would argue that everything else is sick care and not really healthcare, right? And so too much of our ecosystem is about sick care, is about taking symptoms and just trying to do something to overcome those symptoms, as opposed to catch these things a bit earlier. While that may draw in some costs, you may increase some costs short term, you dramatically improve the overall cost of that patient's life over time, because you've addressed these things before they become more serious. Healthcare costs are, famously much higher at end of life for all of us. And that's because when serious things happen, that's when our costs go up. And so this is all about avoiding serious things from happening.
And I think too, the point you make about cost, that's so important. When we think about the healthcare system, I think especially in the United States, you were always thinking about ways to eliminate costs, whether it's for the healthcare providers, the insurance companies, or the individual, and especially individuals or companies. And I think that is always a very clear focus on that for everybody. When you think about, you have AI that's doing a lot of different things to address the preventative care market, because you have Health AI, but you also have these other business units, these other companies that do different parts of the healthcare ecosystem within AI. Talk to us about Health AI and exactly what you're doing. Is that the AI that you are developing in-house, or are you utilizing AI languages from some of these companies that you've acquired over time?
Yeah, so a big part of our strategy at Healwell has been to both acquire and develop companies that have real fundamental AI capabilities, meaning like they have the ability to structure unstructured, data and be able to create simplicity from this kind of complex web of data. And then our strategy is to then integrate that AI into our own mature operating businesses. And that's because these mature operating businesses have patients. They have platforms that serve healthcare providers at scale. So, anytime you're building a business, it's not enough to just have a validated ability to do something special, like, to have a scientific discovery and to demonstrate that you can do something. You have to be able to commercialize that thing that you have just demonstrated you could do. You have to build a business around it. You have to have salespeople. You have to have operations. You have to have the ability to create awareness of your product and service. And so one of the things that we love about this strategy that we have that leverages our M&A program is that we're buying companies at the intersection of healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry that would be dramatically improved by AI. So for example, like Health, we have clinics all over the country serving millions and millions of patients. The ability to have a physician co-pilot for us is enormously valuable. And so that integration with us is really valuable. But then also on the pharmaceutical side, Healwell has bought a contract research organization. A CRO or contract research organization typically carries out most of the clinical trials and orchestrates the activities of a lot of the pharmacy companies when it comes to actually managing, patient identification, finding patients for trials, orchestrating them, moving these types of things forward. And the ability now to go to the pharmacy clients of that CRO and say, hey, we can already do the CRO stuff for you. Now we can accelerate it because we now can go to Well's database of millions of patients, and we can help you acquire patients from that are specific to your requirements. And maybe before it would have taken 8 months to find the appropriate number of patients for a trial. We can do it in 2 weeks now. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that AI kind of drives. And this is why it takes forever to get FDA approval for stuff, because you got to go through multiple trials. You got to manage these trials. And all this stuff is being done the same way it was done like 50 years ago.
It totally makes sense. Like when I look at your 3 business lines, you divide them into AI and data science, healthcare software, and then your clinical research and patient services, which you just talked about. It's a very thoughtful way to put the different levels of operations together. Is there something you're missing that you need to add in the process, in this little ecosystem that you're building within the healthcare space?
I think it's a great question. We don't think so. We think the scope of the business has been well defined now. Now it's about going deep in each one. We want to go deep in really all that digital software that's supporting healthcare providers. We want to be able to do a very deep work in terms of population health at the public sector level. So this is now not just looking at a per patient level, but being able to bring that up to a public sector level and demonstrate to them what weaknesses there are in their strategy to provide health to a whole group of people. Because there's huge money being spent at healthcare at sort of the state level or the country level or a region level. And to be able to give people insights on that is enormously valuable. And then to be able to go very deep on CROs. We think that we can, with our AI technology, digitize, modernize, and AI-enable CROs. And we don't think there's anything more important than that for the pharmaceutical industry, because it's going to dramatically move that industry forward. It's going to speed things up. And pharmacy has a lot of financial power. They're 15 to 20% of the entire cost of healthcare that we have, the $4 trillion. Think about that. 15 to 20% of that cost is with the pharmaceutical industry, but they don't move fast. They would love to move faster. And they're relying on those foot soldiers, which is our CROs. And we're going to tech enable them.
What's the greatest pushback that you get for that business model? What are the challenges that you run into as you think about scaling it and expanding and growing it?
The biggest challenge, what I love about our business is it's very independent. It's not dependent on a whole bunch of other people doing things so that we can one day be successful. I used to run a middleware company before starting Well, and it took forever to make that company successful. I eventually sold it to PayPal and it was a good outcome, but I learned a real lesson with that business. I never wanted to create another business that was reliant on other people to do a bunch of things before I could make money. And so Healwell does not have that problem. It has the benefit of being independent and empowered. And so I would tell you that it's susceptible to the everyday challenges of any business that's acquiring, growing organically and inorganically. Like anytime you acquire a business, integration is more important than the actual acquisition itself. Aligning cultures, developing process. But we're good at it. At Well, we've done now over 85 acquisitions over the past 7 years, and we've never written off $1. So I'm really proud of that. And so our corporate development team and machine is sort of behind Healwell and helping Healwell, really penetrate and exercise all those M&A opportunities. So we feel very excited about our ability to execute here. And really, in our first year of operations, we've done 4 acquisitions. Most companies don't do that in their lifetime. We've done that in our first 10 months.
So Ahmed, when you think about the 3 segments that Lindsey just talked about, AI and data science, healthcare software, clinical research, patient services, is there anyone that you get more excited about that you see really driving the business forward, or are they kind of equally balanced for opportunities?
It's a great question. Personally, I'm excited about the CRO modernization. I just think this is a sector that hasn't changed forever, and it's enormously vital to how the pharmacy industry works. And what I love about it is there's lots of little CROs everywhere with very talented people. This is a people-oriented business, and they understand the needs, they understand the process, they understand what it's going to take to get these clinical trials done, but they have not really digitized very much. And, it's incredible that in 2024, we still have pockets of our services economy that are under digitized, but this is one.
Listen, I went to the doctors not too long ago and I had to fill everything out paper, which is ridiculous in my opinion. But Alex, if we ask you the same question, which business are you very excited about among the three? Is it the same, or do you have a different opinion?
I think Hamid, right, because he's a technologist, an engineer, an entrepreneur, he's really salivating at the opportunity in the clinical research space.
Ahmad, did you hear that? He just called you the triple threat.
I'll try.
And, that opportunity, I just wanted to say, is absolutely staggering. Okay, so Hamid already mentioned, right? We're talking about, there's nearly 5 trillion spent on healthcare and just nearly $1 trillion that's spent just in the life sciences paradigm. So when you look at our mission as a company of Healwell, it's early disease detection. So picture this for a moment. We got Well Health that sees, 5-6 million patients a year and growing, okay, and growing at a pretty steady clip. We're partnered with other hospitals, including ones in the US. So we have access to right now, compliant access to be able to deploy our technology and screen records at scale. And the end result of that is finding those patients that have been misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. And that's super important, right? Because now these patients are on a care pathway way earlier. Okay, we're talking years, like 7 to 11 years earlier if we didn't screen and it was kind of left to the own processes of the healthcare industry. But also, when we identify these patients, the next step after their diagnosis is confirmed, well, the physician's thinking, okay, well, I'm going to start them on a therapy, but damn, some of these diseases are really unfortunate. Is there a clinical trial where they're a suitable candidate for? And some of these trials are life-saving, but patients aren't recruited into them in a timely way, and those trials are just sitting there waiting. So you can picture what we offer at Healwell as we are accelerating the whole therapeutic and research paradigm for healthcare. We want to identify those patients, get them on their care pathway way sooner, and then invariably they'll end up into what sometimes, like I said, could be really life-saving research, etc. So that's a long way to answer your question, Chris, that, I'm most excited about the impact we can have on therapeutic development. And there are drugs around the corner, custom or novel therapeutics that can now aggressively target cancers, for instance, like malignant melanoma, which 5-year survival rate used to be under 10%, just years ago. And now there are curative technologies, right, that are either right now, actually in market or coming, right? So if we can accelerate that, man, we'll make a big impact in terms of 5-year survival rates and how we even think about things like cancer. I'll just add one more point, because I think everyone has been touched, right, by an experience of somebody having a serious issue that's caught late, right? Hamid has, me too. And so we're also thinking about really important areas of health like endocrinology issues and the burden they have on society and diabetes. And a really important one is cognitive health, dementia, etc. And because of how big Well Health is, right, in primary care, we can find those diseases years earlier when they're at the most early stage, right, compared to when somebody's finally going to go see a specialist and have advanced Alzheimer's, right? That's what really we're most passionate about.
I welcome that. As Bob knows, my dad is riddled with dementia, and it's
sorry to hear.
It is really it's one of the cruelest diseases out there. It's a slippery slope, and your brain melts, and you're not even aware of it. It's horrific, absolutely horrific. But I do know that Bob did have a couple of questions he wanted to ask you.
Ahmed, it's just a delight to hear your excitement and enthusiasm about how AI is going to revolutionize and change this whole healthcare system. It's great to hear that. What, though, distinguishes your company compared to others in the industry?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, I think a couple things. First of all, with Healwell, we have truly validated AI technology that is leading edge. I mean, we are, in some cases, we have validated and identified and been able to execute on cases that have never been able to be executed on before. For example, we've been able to use text from an EHR to stage head and neck cancers. First time that's ever happened. That's been published in one of the world's leading medical publications. We have been able to identify rare lung disease cancer patients based on, again, just being able to look at just text from an EHR, right? That looks at all this structured and unstructured information, is able to then really parse that information, make sense of it, correlate the right data points, integrate them, and identify patients that may be exposed to certain diseases. So I think that really strong foundational AI capability is one reason. The second reason is that we don't know of another company actually that has the ability in-house between its different parts to be able to produce these AI insights and have access to the data all under one roof with the healthcare providers to oversee and triage those interactions, and have the ability to work with pharmaceutical companies directly with CROs. So having all of that under one roof, and when you consider the Well Health Network and how it powers from a data perspective, this data availability, if you have the AI, that's great. If you have those algorithms, but you need data to improve those and to be able to detect disease, detect patients. And so to be able to do that all under one roof, we don't know of another company that can do that anywhere.
It's interesting, right? Because I know folks, several months ago, people were concerned about, say, Google's position in AI. And my stance was, geez, they own YouTube. They're the king of search, right? They have access to a tremendous amount of data. They will figure this out. But in your case, it's interesting because I don't think, coming into this conversation, I really put the pieces together. And really what you're talking about is it's through Well Health and its reach that you can collect this data, right? And you have a working model that you can then mimic elsewhere. But, I think Alex said 5 to 6 million patient visits a year at Well Health. So my only question is, how do you get these patients to opt in and share the data so you can grow your model?
Well, that's actually what I was just going to say before you brought it up. It's one thing to have the data. It's another thing to have the consent to use the data.
Yeah.
And because all these people say, hey, we have access to all this data. It's like, well, did anyone say you could use it? Well, that's what's amazing about the Well Network, is that our ability to execute at the clinic level, we're going to the clinic level, and when people come for their appointment, we are asking them for this consent in a detailed and unambiguous way. We're not trying to slide it by them. We're saying, here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to be able to basically use machines to touch your data for the purposes of executing on operational things inside the clinic, or to have machines actually look through and identify gaps in care, things of that nature. But to also, the latest consent that we've added and that we're adding currently is we'd like to also proactively tell you if there's a clinical trial that may be of interest to you. Without that consent, we can't really do that. And that is really, really exciting. And so it's because a lot of people make these claims. It's like, hey, we've got access to a lot of data, but they can't really use it. And that's what's really, really, really interesting. And that's where my mind gets warm. It's like, we can execute at scale. We've got the algos and we've got the data, but more importantly, we have the ability to draw consents to that data.
So what percentage of Well Health's clients are consenting?
Today, because, our network is growing very quickly, probably we're approaching about 2/3 of our entire network has digital consent at the point of care. So you get there and you will, just to be able to go do your visit, you're interacting with some kind of self-service automated kiosk, or if you're doing self-check-in through your own phone, and you will be going through these consents in order to go see your doctor. And if you have any questions, you can go to the front desk and ask about them. There's a whole informed dialogue if you want one right there. This is hard to do because you have to execute at the clinic level. We have 6,000 people as part of this company, right? So you have to be able to go there and say, someone could say, hey, I don't really understand this. What does this mean? Someone at the counter there will have to tell them, this is what that means. This is why it's important. That execution is what's hard.
Is that like a bottleneck too? There's been research recently about how products and services maybe that have AI attached to them or advertised with AI, whether they utilize significant AI or not, is a different story. But the ones that are attached to it, the consumer has a negative perception because they don't understand it. I'm sure that'll change over time. But is that a bottleneck that you're seeing as you're looking for consent?
Yeah, I think you're really right. I think there's a view of like wonder with these things, but then there's also a lot of fear about misuse of my data, fear about, sharing without my knowing, which is, these aren't unreasonable fears, right? And so I think it's like anything in life, right? It's like when you are straight up with someone and you're unambiguous and you are clear and they have to make a decision, then they can make an informed decision, and it's a question of trust. I think we're in a really interesting position because people are trusting us for their healthcare, and we're the ones asking them for these consents. If we were like an intermediary that was rolled out and it was like, hey, this guy wants your data, are you cool with that? I think that'd be different, because it's like, that company and that service provider that's serving you every time you come in, that you've built a relationship with, that you look at their faces when you walk in, they're the ones asking you for this. And this is what's so cool about having all of this under one, proverbial roof, if you will.
So let me ask you this, because I think this might crystallize something. It's very apparent that Well Health is an established business, millions of visits. It could go along perfectly fine, on its own, standalone business. Maybe at some point it could leverage AI, from another company, to do some of these things. But it sounds like that Healwell really needs Well Health, right? It's the proving ground for it. You can develop the models, show the benefits that you're trying to do, and then you can monetize it increasingly outside. Is that a fair way to think about this?
Totally. I don't think there would be nearly as much excitement around Healwell were it not for Wells, for that strategic alliance. And this is actually why the company's valuation exploded after, it's still early days and there's still so much room for it, but it's just that initial growth in valuation and interest came as a result of people's intellectual awareness that, well, AI is interesting, but it dies on the vine without data. They're getting access to enormous amounts of data. What does that mean, right?
Right. It gets back to Bob's question about your competitive positioning, right? If there aren't a lot of other companies that have all these pieces, particularly the Well Health and the access, it just sounds like they're going to start 100 yards, 100 miles, call it what you will, behind.
Totally.
That sounds like it's part of your acquisition strategy too, because I was going to ask this earlier, is you're buying smaller businesses to create this greater, I don't know what you want to call it, this greater company with the three buckets of segments. But it sounds like those smaller companies couldn't thrive as significantly on their own because they don't have the access to the data. They might have the great, like you said, algorithm, AI or software or whatnot, but they're not all connected. And this connects everything together, which is perhaps the genius in the business model that you're building.
Yeah, I think you're right. Look, the way I think about it is the backbone of healthcare is the healthcare provider still. It's going to be a very long time before, even if robots and AI are very good at what they do, it's the same way that we won't get into a plane unless they're the pilot, even though the onboard computer runs the plane. We trust healthcare providers. And Well is the largest physician group, the largest group of healthcare providers in Canada, and it's got a huge footprint in the United States as well. And it starts there. The core value proposition associated with this business is about seeing patients and supporting them. But there's a significant amount of data exhaust that comes off that for learning, right? And as Well's founder and chairman and CEO, I think to myself, how do I unlock the value of this to help advance healthcare, to help advance that healthcare provider? And this is why Healwell makes a lot of sense for us, because I want to make sure that we are providing those tools and those capabilities so that we can amplify physicians, because that's the one big thing that most of the world is struggling with, is growing population and not enough physicians to support that population. So you're going to be in a lot of bad soup there, tough times, if you can't find a way to close that gap. Well, closing the gap, I don't think you should rely on the fact that there will magically be more physicians. So how do you deal with this? Well, the amplification of physicians. Physicians have to become so much more efficient. Their output needs to improve. And this is where the tools and algorithms come in. And so this is what's so important to us. And this is why the ability, people say, is this about monetizing data? I say, no, it's about mobilizing data. It's about mobilizing data to help all four corners of this healthcare ecosystem. I'm not worried about monetizing data. I'm I want to drive value. And then I always believe that once you drive value, then monetization becomes a byproduct of delivering value, right? We don't sell data. We're not interested in selling data. We're interested in mobilizing data to help drive and improve the performance of physicians, the performance of clinics, helping the scientific industry, the CRO industry, the pharmaceutical industry. If you can do these things, you will find monetization opportunities.
Do you see the U.S. government as a potential customer for you with data from Medicare?
Unquestionably, we see every government as needing to do this type of work at scale. And this is where it gets like challenging and exciting from a data science perspective, because the computational need for that is so great. But if you do a good job of that, you start getting insights to where you need to spend your money. And this is the thing, like most of the world's 40 countries that have modern medical systems, they spend more on healthcare than anything. What people don't recognize about, let's say, the United States is that the US spends probably about $700-800 billion a year on defense. They spend many multiples on that on healthcare. So when people start thinking about, because everyone thinks defense has got to be the biggest thing on earth. No, we spend more on healthcare, but are we all spending wisely? And this is not just the US conversation either. In Canada, we're one of the top 5 spenders in the world on a per capita basis. And it's crazy to me because we spend probably, let's call it about $350 billion a year here in Canada. And only about 13% of that is going towards physician spending. So you think about that. 87% of our spending is going to things other than physicians. And who provides care? Physicians.
Yeah. That's crazy.
That's crazy. So we're spending money on equipment, facilities, research, but I would bet you there's a lot of money that is being wasted by most countries. So someone's got to turn the light on. And that's what AI starts to do for you.
But those problems, they're only going to get worse. You mentioned how healthcare costs balloon at end of life. You take a look at the aging population that we have, whether it's the US or other parts, of the world, we're going to be upside down pretty soon, right? So those costs are only going to explode even further. And at least in the US, if you start to think what that means for Medicare, those are staggering numbers. So it's, as an investor, you always look for pain points and solutions. That's where the opportunity is. But let me ask you this though, Ahmed. So in the presentation that you guys provided with us, very risk growth. I think your forecast this year was for, 41 million going to 72 million in 2025. But it seems to slow down after that. And are you guys just being cautious with your forecasts? Maybe there's other acquisitions that get done, or just help us understand that steep ramp to kind of like a speed bump, if you will.
Yeah. Okay, so what you're seeing is our investor deck. And in our investor deck, because of the way securities laws work, we're really not permitted by our legal advisors to consider new acquisitions.
Right. That makes sense. You can't bake in what you don't have.
Right. So this is really based on just our existing business without the benefit of our inorganic growth program. So you're seeing just the organic growth, whereas the vast majority of our growth has come at the hands of our inorganic growth. So it is likely to be multiples of what you just talked about.
All right. Well, let's not let's not overpromise. But so it begs the question. I think you said you've already done 4 acquisitions inside of roughly 11 months. How big is the pipeline? Right? Are you guys courting a lot of different companies? And are you really reliant on that for growth?
Yeah. So look, I think what we are working on is the type of inorganic growth, meaning like M&A that triggers and activates organic growth. Consolidators that acquire companies for a living, they typically grow at around 3-4%. We're committed to not only maintaining a significantly high inorganic growth rate, but to maintain a significant double-digit organic growth rate. And that's what Well has done. So really, we're taking that Well blueprint and applying it to Healwell. And this is why I'm pretty confident that we will continue to execute at Healwell, because at Well, it's the same corporate development team, the same philosophy, the same approach. Within 7 years at $1 billion in revenue and $130 million in EBITDA is what I believe, we're expecting this year in terms of guidance, somewhere between 127 and 130 million. with very significant and, free cash flow conversion off that. And while we're doing that, we are experiencing significant double-digit organic growth. That's the piece that's really exciting and unique in our ecosystem, is being able to maintain a high enough quality of your operations where you are still able to grow organically and you're not reliant on the M&A. And this is exactly what we want to do and what we're doing with Healwell. Our organic growth with Healwell right now is significantly in the double digits. I mean, depending on the particular line of business that you look at, it's anywhere from 10% to 50%.
And is the bulk of that, just to bring the conversation kind of full circle, I asked you guys earlier about, the segment you're most excited about, clinical research. Is that where these superior organic growth opportunities are, or is it one of the other business segments?
The CRO side has good, strong organic growth, but I would say we're even seeing higher organic growth in some of our core AI businesses, where we have these AI algorithms that are taking on new projects as a result of validating new scientific accomplishments and driving our pilot sales and things of that nature. Now, the growth there is coming off a smaller base, so it's obviously going to be higher percentage of growth. The CRO stuff is a good, strong grower for us. And I do think that will be key, because one of the nice things about CROs is that they are typically recurring revenue. They're more episodical and project-based revenue. There's a recurring element to it, so it does become fairly predictable over time. But that actually is very helpful from a purchase multiples perspective. True SaaS revenue has very high multiples. Revenue that has a reoccurring element to it, but isn't truly recurring, has much lower multiples, which is great for us. So I love the idea that I can buy, CROs and really improve them. So now I get the benefit of their organic growth, and I can amplify that growth off a multiple that's not as compelling or not as large. And I can start to integrate true SaaS opportunities within that CRO. So in the future, think about it as a dashboard that the pharmaceutical industry can have to have access to real-time data, real-world intelligence into our data network. So this becomes interesting. So there's potential for SaaS revenue there. The arbitrage there in terms of buying at a lower multiple and converting your business to a higher multiple is also very exciting.
I'm over here laughing, because if you're taking advantage of that lower multiple business to then create more value, which is awesome. So thinking about, remind us though, how much have you raised in cash and deployed, and how much cash? I think as of June 30, the presentation I looked at, you had $14.5 million in cash available. Are these acquisitions, how are you doing them? Are they cash? Is there equity component, convertibles? What are you doing?
They typically have a cash, stock, and earnout component. That's pretty important to us for capital efficiency and making the best out of our dry powder. So when we think about our dry powder analysis, we think perfect world, cash, stock, and earnouts are in three sort of equivalent portions. So if you add all of our in-the-money warrants, you start to get to a much higher cash base for the company. Let's call it, closer to 30 million, $25-30 million, let's say. So if you add the stock and the earnout to that, suddenly now your dry powder availability is closer to $90 million, right? So that's why it's really important. And this is one of the ways that we've been, and I like earnouts, even though they're the most litigated aspect of M&A. If you do good structures and you're fair with people and you have good culture, these are great ways of getting people bought in and focused after the deal closes. Because, once a deal closes, someone just spent, 5 or 10 years of their lives creating a business and they got some liquidity. It's only human to think to kind of take a break. It's just like, big sigh of relief. I, was able to build my family and put some food on the table, and now I got some liquidity. What next? But if you have an earnout and you're going to get more of that liquidity over time, there's a very good chance you're not going to take that big break, and you're going to stay focused on your business and deliver. That's what we've seen. So that's what we like to do.
Well, I got to say, Ahmed and Alex, this was far more than I think any of the three of us thought it was going to be. It just sounds extremely exciting. And it also sounds like you're still in the very early days of what you're doing. And I could tell by the enthusiasm that you guys have that you're just energized to tackle this big problem of healthcare, hopefully improve what we're seeing, leveraging technology, including AI, obviously. But I'm going to have to say, you guys are going to have to come back in, 6 months, a year, and give us another update on where you are, because I think we're all going to be waiting with bated breath, rooting for you at the same time.
With pleasure. It's been a lot of fun and a great pleasure to be with you today.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll have you back on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to speak with everybody.
Thanks, Alex. All right, folks, that's our conversation with Healwell AI. My thanks to Ahmad Shahbazi, the chairman, and Dr. Alexander Dobranowski, the CEO. This is where we talk about what we learned. So, Lindsey, go on straight to you. What did you learn? What did this reinforce?
I mean, this was a really exciting conversation for me, Chris, because what they're doing, you could just feel the energy in the conversation with them. And I thought what was the most important was the question you asked is how their organizational structure matters. They've got the patient access to utilize the AI on that, then they utilize their software platforms for. I'm being too wordy. Can I just start off?
No, you're fine. You're fine. Look, you said I was right. That's all that matters, Lindsey. We can end it there. Bob, what about you?
I thought it was a very interesting conversation talking about the quickness and the speed with which they can get the data processed. My parents are older, in their late 70s, early 80s, and they have difficulties today here in the United States trying to get great treatment from doctors and getting the data correct. And unfortunately, I did have a relative who was misdiagnosed, and this is a topic that Ahmed talked about is very important of them to try and solve the problem. And I think that is a key issue over there, which is really interesting. And of course, the cost containment issue is a big one as well too. Lots and lots of waste, especially here in the United States with health. If they can tackle that, they're doing a yeoman's job.
No doubt. During our conversation, I shared with everybody something about Google and AI. And as I thought more about the conversation that we had with Ahmed and Alex, I'm almost thinking that they have the potential to be as disruptive as Amazon was on shopping. And what I mean by that is Amazon, to me, where they really excel is removing transactional friction. So if these guys can do the same in the healthcare industry by removing operational friction, I just think that would be fantastic. They would be able to enable companies to really trim a lot of the fat. If you guys listen to the show, obviously you did because you're still here now, that you heard that, 13% of all healthcare money spent in Canada only goes to physicians. There's a lot of waste in that other 87%. I just sit back and I think, my God, what are those numbers for the US? Because we know it's only going in one direction as our population ages. I just think this is going to be a company to watch.
No doubt about it.
Well, hopefully we'll have these guys back on in, several months and we'll get a great update. But folks, I would encourage you to go look at Healwell AI's investor relations presentation, read up on their financial filings. And when you're done, you'll have hopefully a better picture of the company. And you'll be saying to yourself, now I know why there's the buzz with Healwell AI.